Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. I decided to catch up with Daniel Brown, a local dance student at my dance studio, Colorado Ballet Society. I wanted to get Dan's perspective on the stereotypes and bullying that often occurs for males in ballet. I met up with him to hear his thoughts about what dance is to him and how this bullying can affect him, and has proven to be hurtful in his life. So, the first question I asked Dan was, how old are you and how long have you been dancing? Dan said, I'm 19 years old and I danced seriously all through high school. Prior to that, I was an acrobatic tumbler for about 10 years. I still dance when I have time today. Next, I asked, what has dance done for you and why do you think dance is important? Dan said, dance, in and of itself, has the ability to tell stories in such a powerful and effective way. Being in a dance studio teaches discipline, focus, coordination, perseverance, and courage. When you take class, you very often will be asked to demonstrate a minute or longer combination, which you may have only seen once or twice. This also leads to greater cognitive ability and stronger neuromuscular connections, especially as we approach sections of class such as Petit Allegro, quick small jumps, that are often given as a brain teaser in class. I personally have gained so much confidence while training to be a dancer and being put out of my comfort zone both in the studio and out. So I asked Dan, have you ever experienced someone who has stereotypical ideas or negative perceptions about you when you explain that you're a dancer? Dan told me, anytime a person hears that I am a dancer, I feel there are a few things they tend to assume right away. One of the biggest things that people tend to make an assumption about when thinking of a male in dance is their sexual orientation. Now here's the thing. Yes, there are many dancers who happen to be a part of the LGBTQ community, and I am proud to be one of them. I would dare say to admit, however, that the majority of male dancers are not. I admit I may not be the best person to answer this because in truth, I don't care much about what people think of me in this aspect, but I have spoken with other guys who feel uncomfortable with people making assumptions about their sexuality. Somehow, this incorrect idea has infiltrated many people's thinking, and it now causes uncertainty for the men who would otherwise be interested in pursuing dance. So I next asked Dan, have you ever experienced bullying because you are a dancer? Dan told me, yes, and I would guess that we all have. I'm blessed to say that my experiences have not been major incidences by any standard, just jeers and comments at public performances and so forth, but I would wager that there is not a single male dancer who has not experienced some kind of negative backlash from their chosen pastime. And I know many others who have experienced worse verbal and even physical abuse. So I asked Dan, how have these events impacted you? Have they impacted your dance training at all? Dan told me, things have never been easy in the dance community. We're resilient, we've got thick skin, and we love what we do. I think for the most part, we're pretty good about turning the anxiety into a fire that drives us on. That's why dancers have stayed around for so long, I feel. But it would be a lie to say that it doesn't sometimes make it hard to keep going. There have been times when I've second-guessed what I was doing and felt uncomfortable with some of the people that are watching me through the window in class or in rehearsal or even audiences at shows. I know multiple guys who have dropped out of dance because their friends and family have not been supportive and have degraded dance training for men. I asked Dan if he could explain why these seemingly small things like rude comments and ideas can be so hurtful. Dan explained, because it's a constant factor. When you spend that much time training for something. In my pre-professional days, I was training 6 days a week, anywhere from 3 to 8 hours on a given day. It becomes part of your identity. So if someone takes a jab at something that is such a significant part of who you are, it does become difficult. And when those jabs are more present than not, that'll weigh on you absolutely. So I said, why do you think people have these negative stereotypes about ballet dancers? Dan said, there you've got me. This is one where I'm maybe not the best to answer this question because it has never made sense in my mind either. It is the same thing as how people tend to think of pink as a girl's color and blue as a boy's color. How did that become a thing? Did boys used to be born with blue hair or something? I don't know. It's confusing to me in the same way. So I asked Dan, is there anything you think we can do to change these stereotypes and stop some of the bullying that goes on? Dan said, we'll never eradicate it entirely. That's just a fact of living in a fallen world. But I do think we're making progress. As more and more parents are educated about the benefits and requirements of dance training, my hope is that they'll encourage their children to understand the same way. That's how generations change their minds, and I do think we live in one of the most accepting generations, at least where topics like pursuing your passions are concerned. So I also asked Dan, what would you say to someone that believed that dance was not for boys and that it was not a real sport? Dan said, I would encourage that person to take a beginner ballet class. After that, they should watch an intermediate or advanced class, if not a full-length ballet. If anyone can do that without appreciating the athleticism required, they are either A, not doing it right, or B, lying. As for the idea that dance is not for boys, I would first want to understand what makes them think that, and then I would ask them their opinions on individuals such as Gene Kelly, Baryshnikov, and Fred Astaire, not to mention more current icons like Roberto Bull, Travis Wall, and Evan McKee, to name a few. So, finally, I asked Dan if there was anything that he would like to add to the interview, or any experiences, thoughts, or questions he had on the issue. Dan told me, I would say that if you want to pursue something, do it. And if you encounter opposition, you're probably doing something right. You can't just let the haters win. Work hard, fight for what you believe in, choose kindness, and be brave. We're all rooting for you. And I couldn't ask for a better answer from Dan. He really opened my eyes to the challenges that male dancers face in this industry and some of the bullying that occurs. But he also gave me hope that male dancers can overcome these stereotypes, and he gave me some insight into how resilient and brave these dancers really are. So in the end, in the words of Dan, work hard, fight for what you believe in, choose kindness, and be brave. We're all rooting for you. Thanks for tuning into this interview, and keep on dancing.